Live across the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or translator. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Thanks for coming in and joining us. It is the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska and across across the internet. You know what it's like. Although right now I'm not broadcasting on the peninsula. They're having some problems down at the station down there. So it's just you and me and all the folks on the internet and all the folks in the interior. So thanks for coming in and good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. So, hour one of the big radio broadcast this morning, and I appreciate you guys coming in and joining us. We have got some stuff and things. We've got some stuff and things to discuss, and I want to see what you guys have to say about some stuff as well. But first, we're going to go over the headlines from over the weekend, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's going on around the state and around the country. I had some time to pontificate this weekend, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Maybe some maybe some lice. They make a cream for that. Maybe some life lessons learned and some other stuff that we can discuss and go on and we're going to talk about that. But in hour two, we're going to get serious. In hour two, we're going to talk with Sarah Montalbano from the Alaska Policy Forum. She's going to be joining us and come in, and she's going to recap her presentation in front of the legislature. And we're going to have a conversation with her. She is the education expert at the Alaska Policy Forum, and she had a discussion on education reform with the legislature here a couple of weeks ago, and finally getting a chance to bring her on board this morning to kind of go over that and discuss it. You'll see that in the Must Read Alaska blog or website, I guess I should say, that they have a new report out, that they're commenting on a new report that is showing the ratio between teachers and administrative staff, and showing that the problem in many of these districts is an overburden of administrative staff. We talked about this with her last time she was on the program, and we're seeing that that in some cases the teacher to staff ratio is about 1-to-1. Sometimes it's slightly over that, but in some districts, for example, in the Tanana City school districts, there are a lot more than that. So for every the teacher to administrator ratio is 0.35 to 1, meaning that there are almost three administrators for every one teacher. So again, that's the district employs nearly 3 other staff members for every single teacher, which is a problem, I would say. If nobody else can say it, I'll say it. It's going to be a problem. So we'll talk with her about that, not talk about her with that. We'll talk about that and have that discussion as well, plus all the other stuff that she points out in during the discussion of what she showed to the legislature. So, what else is going on? I guess we can start off with some of the headlines and see what is going on out there. I guess we should go to the national level bill first, simply because I think it's topical and it presents a lot of issues here for us to deal with. The article is in the Must Read Alaska. Again, lots of articles this morning coming together out of Must Read. And the big story is that on Friday, Republicans passed House Resolution number 5 called the Parents' Bill of Rights. It was a 213 to 208 vote. And one of the people who voted against the Parental Bill of Rights, our very own Congresswoman for all Alaska, Mary Peltola. She voted against the measure at every opportunity, according to Must Read, along with the rest of House Democrats. She stated on the record that children need privacy from their parents and that schools should keep information from parents so that children are, quote, safe at school. Okay. The bill was written, quote, to ensure the rights of parents are honored and protected in the nation's public schools, according to the resolution. It arose after numerous reports from every state of the union about gender ideology being taught and soft porn being made available to young children at school. The bill requires schools to publish what the curriculum is, so that parents can see if the topics such as critical race theory, critical gender theory, or other controversial topics are being taught. This, of course, flies in the face of what Democrats and progressives are pushing for, which is basically a state-run school system that is completely independent of parental wishes or control. And we've seen this kind of absolutism and kind of this idea that we know better than you from Terry McAuliffe in his race in Virginia. When he lost his race in Virginia, one of the prime reasons he lost that race was because parents were outraged about some of the things that were going on in school. And he literally said from the campaign trail that parents should have no input on what's being taught in school. And that just infuriated people. I mean, not surprising, right? You're sending your kids to these public schools and you want to get all this stuff done. And it is somehow not surprising that they should, that parents should want to have a say in what their kids are being educated in. And he then was soundly trounced by Youngkin, and that was one of the key points. But see, it's happening all over the country. And this is why, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to beat it. I'm going to beat that horse with a stick. This is why, if it's possible for you, and I know there's many reasons why many of you say, I mean, it's not possible for you to homeschool your kids. I understand that. It's everything else. But if you can, homeschooling is going to save you a lot of heartache in the long run, simply because you're not going to have to deal with this madness, this absolute madness of what's going on in our education system, which has been completely subsumed by progressive values. We'll get to that here in a minute. I mean, at every level. We'll get to that part here in a minute. The bill also required, the resolution, back to the House resolution, the bill also requires schools to get permissions from parents before referring to their children by an alternative secret gender pronoun. He, him, ze, zer, he, ze, zer, she, her, they, them, ze, here. I don't know. I can't even pronounce them all. Or any other pronouns that gender ideologues are promoting to younger and younger children. Schools would not be allowed to regender a child or refer to a child by a different name than the one given to the child by the parent. It also says that children must use the locker room or bathroom of the gender with which they were conceived or born. In other words, schools that receive federal funding would not be allowed to have boys who are identifying as girls use these facilities. Students would also be required to give parents the reading lists that are being given to the students and be transparent about what books are being offered in classrooms and school libraries. The legislation, which now goes to Congress, would boost parents' rights to speak out at school board meetings. Remember last time when they started saying that parents were domestic terrorists for speaking out about and being angry about what was being taught to their children? Yeah, again, I have a fix for that. Take your kids out of the public school systems and fix that. Now, I know it's not available for everybody, and I know I'm beating a dead horse. But you know what, folks? The tide is rushing in one direction. I would rather pull my kids out of the tide and still fight it. You could still fight the tide. You could still fight the problems that are going on out there. But I would rather have my kids out of it while I'm fighting it than seeing them tumble into the surf. Right. You know what I mean? It's just, wow. Oof. In the recent months, the Anchorage School Board has prevented a parent from reading material into the record that is from books that are available to elementary school through high school students. When parent Jay McDonald tried to read from the children's training porn book called Let's Talk About It, he was shut down by the school board, even though it is a title that is or was at one point available to children. So this is, I mean, just, it's problematic to say the least. Are there parents who treat their kids badly? Yes. Are they a majority? No. Should we basically suspend all parental rights for everyone based on the actions of a few? No. I mean, this is the same reaction that we hear about gun violence and everything else, that even though it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, everybody's got to suffer and everybody's got to pay. But this is your children. These are your children. And I mean, we've got to do it. The final comment and capper on this whole thing: Democrats have raged over the bill, which will need to pass the Senate and be signed into law by the president, which is unlikely. But U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in a floor speech, said, "Our children need urgent and aggressive education solutions." When we talk about progressive values, I can say what my progressive values are, and that is, well, first of all, she doesn't even have proper grammar here, but freedom over fascism. So apparently, having parents having a say in what's going on with the education of their children is fascism. Don't fall for this BS. Just don't do it, my friends. This is, we're in a war for the hearts and minds of our children. I don't think that that's saying too much. I think that we are in a war for the hearts and minds of our children. And we have seen that they have stripped out so much, and we've allowed them. We have sent our kids to these public schools and places, and we're just shocked, I tell you, that our kids come back and say some of the darndest things. This is the fight. Was it Khrushchev that said, give me 3 generations of teaching and I'll own the schools and all? I can't remember who said it. One of the Russian Soviet luminaries said something along the lines of, give me your children for 3 generations and I'll, this is it. And we're already seeing it. And they have the progressive values and ideals, these non-traditional, what I think would be considered overall to be non-traditional ideals, have infiltrated the schools and continued to do at every level, the educational system at every level. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But before we do, we got to go. We're going to continue here in a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Okay. Hi, how are you? Yeah, I don't know why you guys can't hear the music today. The music is going out over the radio, but for some reason it's showing up on the thing, but it's not going out on the I wonder. I wonder. How about this? Tell me if you can hear this. Just tell me if you can hear this. And I'm going to say you probably can't because it didn't show up on my meters. Okay. All right. Well, I found out this morning I swapped out. I had a piece of equipment fail or partially fail. And so they sent me a replacement and I installed it and everything looked good. But for some reason, it's not recording properly. So it's something I'm going to have to get into that I didn't have time to. I should have done it this weekend, but I was sitting this weekend out. I was taking a break from the world. All right. Let me go back over here. See what you guys are talking about. Voice is loud and clear. Well, that's the good part, isn't it? Peltola, children can grow from the privacy of their parents. They can grow up and get their own place. Peltola's out of their mind. I've seen some of those books. They are not soft porn. I thought I was going to throw up going through them. It's hardcore perversion. Yeah. And they want more money. Just got a permission slip Friday about sex ed class for fourth graders. Parents can preview the video they'll be showing. I think we're going to opt out, though, and my husband will have the puberty talk after our boy turns 10. Yes. Let's see. The frustrating part is even though adults support abusive and damaging policies, people are stupid and vote for them. Getting your kids out of that cesspool of public schools is the only way to stop it. How arrogant of these people to act like we need to give the parents of children a right to be involved. Well, I mean, at least they're fighting for it, as far as I could see. Kevin McCabe is trans slender. He identifies as slim and gorgeous. Yeah. She clearly has no idea what fascism is either. I mean, yeah, I mean, her sentence wasn't even grammatically correct, but I mean, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? Just saying. Lenin, Stalin, Lenin. It was Lenin, apparently. Give me a generation of youth and I will change the whole world. Give me one generation of youth, says Lenin. And Michael says KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov laid it out in the 80s. The plan was to ideologically subvert America by taking over the education system and grooming the kids. And mission accomplished. Yeah. Where's the fancy music? Well, I just said where the fancy music is. Yeah, Vladimir Lenin. Has the Soviet national anthem been adopted by the Anchorage Assembly? No. I appreciate that, Bill. Yeah, that was a tough day. Thursday, we lost. We had to put my wife's dog down after 17 years. That was hard. That was a hard time. I needed to check out for the rest of the week after that. It was a difficult thing. These morons can't even handle a checkbook and they think they can manage people's children. What? Just one more thing for the government to destroy. I'm with you, buddy. I am with you on that for sure. Again, this is the thing. I'm all for fighting the system. I just don't want my kids to be in the. It's like fighting. I watched The Last of Us this weekend, and it's like, you're fighting the zombies, or the flower people or whatever they are, and you could fight them. Just don't put your kids in the middle while you're shooting bullets downrange. And that's what we're doing right now. If you're leaving your kids in the system while you're fighting it, that's what's happening. All right, here we go. You're not going to hear much, but I am. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go. Okay. We got things to talk about, things to do, things to see. We were just talking about the vote in Washington, D.C. by Mary Peltola to prevent parents from having a say in what's going on with their kids in the school system. And we're seeing this as a trend, by the way. I mean, this has been and you're seeing the reaction across the country. I just talked about, Virginia, where the race between Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin, I mean, that was a big deal, right? I mean, that was an upset of national precedence. And I'll tell you right now that whole thing hinged in the end on the fact that Terry McAuliffe spoke the quiet part out loud, which was basically, we want to take your children and teach them what we want to teach them, and parents should have no say in what their children are being taught. Which has been the whole thing for a long time. The quote, thank you, by the way, for Senator Rob Meyer, who corrected me on the quote. The quote was from Lennon, not John Lennon, the other Lennon. It said, "Give me one generation of youth, and I will change the world." And we've given them multiple generations of youth. And then Mikhail says, over on YouTube, he points out that KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov laid it out in the 80s when he came over to the United States after defecting from the KGB. He said the plan was to ideologically subvert America by taking over the education system and grooming the kids. And whether that was PSYOP and not the truth, or whether it is the truth, it sure appears that is the case. Right? It appears that that's what's going on. And I was just saying, look, if you want to fight in the school systems to fix these kind of things, I fully endorse that. I do. I'm not saying that you quit fighting it. What I'm saying is you take your kids out of the line of fire. I watched the show this weekend, The Last of Us. I've been waiting to watch it until all the episodes were out. And I finally watched it, and I was thinking about it I was thinking about many different things from that show, but I was just thinking about it in terms of what we're talking about right now. If you're going to fight over the education system, and you're going to try and bring it back to where there is some parental control and some of this nuttiness about teaching kids, that pornography is good and all these other things that we've read out of these books that are coming right out of these books. Then my suggestion is you take the kids out of the line of fire as you fight the battle. If you're shooting the zombies who are coming towards you, you don't put the kids between you and the zombies while you're shooting the zombie. This is from The Last of Us, what I'm thinking about from this weekend, right? You don't put the kids right in the line of fire as you're trying to do it. So that is, the whole thing is just so frustrating, and it's crazy. It's crazy. So my suggestion is you pull because it's happening, and it's happening at every level. And I think you need to be very careful about where you're sending your kids, or if you're sending your kids to the higher education, where you're sending them to higher education, or if you are. State lawmakers on Friday signaled their opposition to the nomination of a leader of a conservative organization to serve on the University of Alaska Board of Regents. Bethany Markham, we've had her on this program. She's the executive director of the Alaska Policy Forum, which advocates for limiting government and reducing state spending, including on education. She was nominated to the board earlier this year. Her appointment is subject to confirmation by the entire legislature. which will vote on the governor's nominations later this year. The House and Senate Education Committees held hearings Friday to consider Markham's nomination, during which some lawmakers questioned whether Markham is an appropriate choice for the board that oversees the state's public universities. They cited the policy forum's backing for proposed budget cuts made by Dunleavy in 2019 that included a 40% cut to state funding for the university system. Andy Story, the Democrat from Juneau, said to me, the policy forum has been very negative towards our education system. And by negative, what she means is they want to not fund it at the same level, and they're looking for accountability. I guess that's negative. She said, Rebecca Himshoot from Sitka said she would give a higher level of scrutiny to Markham's nomination because she doesn't have the progressive or liberal bona fides that, Lawmakers also raised concerns over Markham's actions on the state redistricting board, citing an illegal gerrymandering attempt. A judge last year overturned a map redrawing East Anchorage districts. The judge redraws the map every time. A judge has gotten involved and overturned previous boards in the last 6 times. I mean, almost every time there's a redistricting, a judge gets involved and overturns the map that was drawn by the thing. This is not anything, but she's some kind of criminal. Himshoot said Markham's actions on the redistricting board perhaps point to a lack of understanding or lack of respect for the Open Meetings Act, which is rich coming from a member of the legislature. Rich. Absolutely the height of hypocrisy coming from a member of the legislature. Senator Loki Tobin said Markham's proposal during the redistricting process indicates that geographic representation and fair votes don't seem to be something that Markham prioritizes. This is all about the witch hunt of being on the redistricting board in the bottom line. I see that this is all this is about. Responding to her criticisms in support of Dunleavy's budget in 2019, the big cut year, Markham said it was incorrect that she championed the governor's cuts to the university system. After he faced backlash for his proposal, she was among those who publicly defended his plan to massively reduce state spending, but Markham said support for cutting state spending was not directed specifically at the university. But it should have been. I mean, right? We should have been. Questions from lawmakers were echoed by several members of the public who asked the legislators during public testimony not to confirm Markham. Some of them wondered if Markham would have a conflict of interest given her leadership of the policy forum. Of course, Joelle Hall, president of the AFL-CIO, got up and said her job is to advocate, and it may be for positions that are contrary to positions of the Board of Regents. I mean, unlike, I'm sure, the labor, I mean, that's anyway, this is the whole thing. Andy Story, the Juneau Democrat. This is all in the ADN, by the way. Questioned Markham on Friday about the policy forum's reports on Alaska's spending on K-12 schools that conflict with studies done by the University of Alaska Anchorage researchers and ICER. Analysts affiliated with the forum have repeatedly claimed that Alaska spends far above average on public education and that a large chunk of that money is spent on administrators. ICER studies have shown that when adjusted for cost of living, Alaska spends below average. I don't see the policy forum taking that perspective as something that is accurate. As a Board of Regents, you need to trust your university and use some of those data sources. So use only the sources of data that match up with what we want, essentially, is what she's saying here. Anyway, again, anybody could be there except for a conservative. Anybody can be in the university except for a conservative. We've seen this time and time and time again, this kind of witch hunt that goes on, that they're stalking and, stuffing their side of the team only with people that agree with their ideology. Forget anybody who might bring in challenging ideas or a different point of view. And this is, of course, We've seen that in universities across the country, not just in boards of regents or anything else, but God forbid any teacher or any student or professor should come in there with an ideology or something that might challenge people's perceptions on things, one way or the other. One way or the other. God forbid that should happen. They'll immediately be canceled. I mean, I could show you a ream of stories from Reason and Fire and Campus Collective and all these other different organizations that are following these news stories out there, where anyone would dare to talk about something that runs afoul of the status quo and how they were run out of town on a rail. And here's just another example of that. Here's Bethany Markham being run down because she deigns to belong to an organization that is looking for smaller, more sustainable budgets, looking for accountability, looking for any of those things. I mean, it's again, the horse is not dead yet. This is another reason why, before I would send my kids to any of these institutions, I would be looking long and hard at how these institutions work and where they go and what they support and how they spend their money and who they bring on their board, et cetera, et cetera. There's some private colleges out there that you might want to look into. I'm just saying there might be some private colleges that you may want to be looking into in the long run here as it goes forward. Also coming out of the legislature is a 40-page bill that was filed in the Senate designed to close a loophole that Hillcorp has been able to take advantage of due to its corporate structure, and it was filed by Senate rules. SB 0114 is an act establishing an income tax on certain entities producing or transporting oil and gas in the state relating to the oil and gas production tax, and has been referred to only to Senate Finance, which means it's on the fast track. The bill says that any entity that has a qualified taxable income of over $4 million in a tax year shall pay 9.4% of the qualified taxable income over that $4 million. There are a number of provisions in the lengthy bill, but it's clear that the bill is targeting Hillcorp, which is an LLC and thus not covered by some of Alaska's oil tax structure. I think this will be something that this kind of evens the playing field for what we were talking about before. When Hillcorp bought out BP, and you could see it's. I think this is a good thing, and I think Brad Keithley will admit that it's a good thing. This is what he's been griping about for a while. This is one of the holes in the legislative thing, and this is something that needed to be fixed. So there you go. And yeah, Tom McKay thank you very much. Tom McKay was also speaking out on the Bethany Markham thing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to reel backwards here, but somebody just dropped me a tweet that got put out there. Tom McKay was defending Bethany Markham during the whole discussion and said that she was an extraordinarily qualified for the board. He said, diversity is a word that's thrown around a lot these days, but it seems to me that it's only acceptable to be diverse if you agree with the establishment's options and opinions. And then Andrew Halcrow, who is he still even relevant anymore? Andrew Halcrow said, "Dear Tom McKay, I'm going to make it my personal mission to ensure you never serve another term representing Sand Lake. You won by 7 votes last election, and yet you still insist in being the league leader in ignorance and obnoxiousness." Andrew Halcrow is just like one of the most. I interviewed him one time. One of the most arrogant people I have ever met, virtually, because I don't think he wasn't. I don't think he was in the studio, but just one of those things. This is one of those things. Anyway, there you go. We're up against the break. We got to go. We're gonna take a quick one, and when we come back, we will continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more in just a moment. Don't forget, we've got Sarah Montalbano from Alaska Policy Forum up next. Back right after this. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Okay. With the Harold has been bitching about the whole oil tax thing, and I say, well, yeah, I think this is one that I can actually get behind, and that I know Brad will be pleased about, because this is part of that $500 million that he knows is laying on the table. And Harold just goes on about propaganda again. Do you even listen to what you say? I'm asking for a friend. I'm just asking for a friend. Okay. Representative Carpenter. Sorry, I'm reading this. I'm reading this for the first time along with you. Representative Carpenter is presenting two bills at Ways and Means this evening, HB 109 and HB 110. 109 closes the so-called loophole by lowering corporate taxes for all companies. H 110 takes the annual dividend out of the Department of Revenue and Appropriations and processes and says the paid shall pay the dividend. I am all about that. I am all about that. Donna also said earlier, and I didn't get a chance to get around to it, the ICER study is based on made-up data. That pretty much sums it up. Sums it up right there. Made-up data. Hal Crow was another one like Walker who wanted to open up the permanent fund to finance a pipeline, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he was part of that whole brigade. Yeah. It's let's talk about where to send our kids to school while not being able to figure out how to turn on the music. This is Harold this morning. Okay. Let's talk about how to send your kids to school while not being able to figure out how to turn on the music. Hey, you know what? I got it on the radio. That's all I care about right now. I'm not going to stress about things that are out of my control right now, Harold. You keep being you, man. You just keep being you. It's just, like that hurts my feelings or something because I can't figure out how to turn the music on. No, I just haven't taken the time to do it because I don't care that much. I got other things to worry about. You guys will be fine without music. Radio's got music. You guys don't. Sorry. It'll be fine for this one day. By tomorrow, guess what? There'll be music again. Could you imagine living with that? Yeah, Jennifer. Yes, Jennifer, you're right. I mean, could you imagine living with that 24/7? Let's see what else. Step away from the Folgers. Kevin said, I checked on the cost of the chef in the Capitol building based on some misinformation transmitted here last week. What I found is the chef is a 21J, $1,812 biweekly. Her total cost, including benefits, is estimated to be around $30,000 for a session. She's only there for the session. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What do you expect from a low budget radio show? I mean, what do you expect? Your dog doesn't miss the bell. So you guys aren't even hearing the bell. I'm only hearing the bell. Well, then there you go. See how that works? It's fine. It's fine, just fine. I'm just looking at something right now. Now that you said you can't hear the bell, see, that's doubling of me. That's doubling, and that's doubling. Oh, that's spooky. I like that. All right, we'll go back over here. Sorry, I was just testing something. It was like that's weird. Because if you didn't even hear the bell, that means something totally different. Okay. Oh, you know what we need? I know what would probably fix this. It would be a right here, and it would be right here, and it would be right there, and it would be right there. And how about right there? Now I need to unhide everything. And let's see. Is that the one that I want? That's the one that I want right there. See if you guys can hear this. Whoa. Let's see. There you go. You guys hear that? Nope. You can't hear it. Oh, who knows? It'll be a full reboot. I'm going to have to remap all this stuff. Apparently, they got mixed up. So that's okay. Bell rang. It's time to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. Here we go. Well, okay. How are you? Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the program. Hour 2 continues. Oh, we've got fun stuff to talk about here next. All right, let's continue on here and see. I want to talk a little bit about. I guess I want to talk a little bit about life lessons. Life lessons. I was I mentioned a couple times this morning that my wife and I finally got around to watching The Last of Us this weekend. And I got to say uh, it made me think a lot. It made me think a lot about um perceiving what's going on around you, again, trying to read between the lines of what's happening out there. And it made me think. It made me it made me think about what I'm perceiving as things going well, things going not well. And what it reminded me of was the fact that you know, I guess from the old it's the same thing with The Walking Dead, right? When watching The Walking Dead, it's the same kind of thing. Where you see the lines and lines and lines of cars trying to leave town and everything else, and I'm thinking, by the time you've reached that point, it's already too late, right? If you're stuck in the traffic jam trying to leave the big city or wherever, it's already been too late. You missed all the warning signs. And I'm trying to look at that, and that's why I'm talking about the schools. Not that the schools are the zombie apocalypse, but again, it's how my mind works. It triggers certain things, and I start to think about it. If you don't know that it's time to, if you don't know that it's time to evacuate, from a certain area, By the time you go along with everybody else and everybody's figured it out, it's too late, right? If you don't leave early enough, if you don't see the warning signs, if you don't pick up and leave and take off early, if you haven't prepared to take off early or leave and have a full tank of gas and some supplies or something like that, then you're going to be stuck out on the highway with everybody else trying to leave town because it's too late. It's too late. You've seen this imagery time and time and time again in every disaster or monster or zombie movie you've ever seen, right? It's always the same. Everybody's caught out on the road on the way out because they didn't see the signs. Now, a few people saw the signs and they pulled out and they left early. May not have been convenient for them, may not have been the most cost-effective thing, may have cost them some money or some time or something else. And who knows, if the disaster hadn't happened, maybe they would have felt foolish. But in the long run, they were the ones that get out. Because if you wait until all the cars are bumper to bumper on the one exit leaving town, here in Alaska, it'd be everybody leaving Anchorage in bumper to bumper traffic. If you are the one guy that if you wait for everybody else, you're not going to make it. And that's what I was really thinking about with this education thing. Because again, I know that, I'm trying to be understanding of people who say they just can't do it. They just can't, single income or something else or whatever's going on. And I understand that. But there are other options, whether that's, alternatives, co-ops, learning pods, teacher pools. I mean, there's all different kinds of things you can do. And getting out early is the way to do it, because you do not want to be stuck when there has to be some kind of mass exodus, even if a mass exodus is possible. I mean, one day they could just say you can't take your kids out of school anymore. Then what are you going to do? I mean, right? They had the truancy officer before, and now we've got options, but what if they defund those options and all this other kind of stuff? But again, if you're going to fight the war over this kind of stuff, if you're going to fight the war, don't you want to take your kids out of the line of fire? I mean, sometimes the things that run through my head are just, I know they're just crazy. Just crazy. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. That movie actually brought me, or that show actually brought me a lot of interesting thoughts and conundrums. It's a very good show. If you enjoy kind of thought-provoking, dystopian, end of the world kind of stuff, it's a good show. If you're like, I just lived through the pandemic and I don't want, okay, we got you. You don't have to watch that one. You don't have to watch that one as well. Anyway, so I guess that's my final thoughts for today on this education thing, is that I would implore you. This system is so top heavy and so fundamentally broken at this point. I don't know how we get back to it. And if you even suggest that any changes are made, I'm not talking about saying we should just shut the schools down. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying any changes at all. How dare you point out in this story in the ADN, how dare you point out that the administrative costs are, well over, I mean, how dare you point that out? Right? That Alaska spends above average and that a large chunk of that money is spent on administrators. Even if Alaska doesn't spend above average, all you have to do is look at the disparity between administrators and teachers' positions, right? This is again, here's from the story. Andy's story. This is from the ADN. Andy's story, question Markham about the policy forums, reports on Alaska spending in K-12 and how it conflicts with UAA and ICER. Analysts affiliated with the policy forum repeatedly claimed that Alaska spends far above average on public education and that a large chunk of that money is spent on administrators. ICER studies have shown that when adjusted for cost of living, Alaska spends below average. But no claim about whether or not the largest chunk is spent on administrators. That's the thing. If you start taking cracks at things like that, they go, whoa. Don't shoot the, why even at this point, I'm not having my kids in a situation like that. Not having my kids in the line of fire while we're discussing that. It just makes no sense. We'll put them in the spin cycle while we battle it out over whether or not it should be a long or a short spin cycle. Just take them out. Take them out. Find the resources that you need to do. You could be a great teacher for your kid. You could be a great teacher for your child. That is 100% true right now. Okay, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return in hour 2 with Sarah Montalbano right after this. Don't go anywhere. Okay. You guys, yeah. Wait. Sarah's coming to talk about schools. You aren't done. I know you don't. Well, you know enough. This is not you. Last word. I know. You know what I meant. Oh, gosh. Yeah, ICER is a division of UAA, right? I mean, yeah. No conflict of interest there. No conflict of interest there. All right. I'm going through the whole thing here. See what else you guys have been saying. Okay. There we go. Sarah Montalbano is in the green room. Now I'm just hopeful that you guys will be able to hear her. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to hear her, but I want to make sure you guys can hear her. So be sure that you sound off here. We're going to check in with her here in a hot second. Be sure you sound off and let me know if you can hear her, because it's going to be really disappointing if for some reason you can't. I'll be bummed about that. I'm going to have to figure something out. Luckily, I am recording it on one end with StreamYard, so we'll see what happens from there. All right, let's go over there right now, and we will add her onto the stream and see what she has to say. Hello, Sarah. How are you, my dear?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm
Hope I'm
not doing.
audible.
You're audible. You're audible to
Good.
me. I'm gonna mute myself, and actually, I'm gonna turn the music off. All right. Well, I see Sarah's not showing up on my recording, so I'm hoping that she's coming out to you guys. Um, if not, oh, Jeffrey just gave me the thumbs up, so they can hear you, which is
Very
good.
good.
Which means the recording on the StreamYard is hearing you, so I don't have to worry about recording the rest of it. Okay, good, good. So, how's it feel to be the subject of a legislative confirmation? How dare you suggest that Alaska spends more than almost anywhere else and spends it all on administrators? Huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's the basic premise here. There's a lot that goes into this. This presentation we gave was
Yeah,
enormous. Tried to cover the entirety of Alaska's education landscape.
yeah. I just found it interesting that Bethany Markham is up there getting her uh anyway, hold on a second. I'm going to put you guys on hold for just a second because I got the station from Homer calling me. Be right back. Okay, long-winded. Here we go. Um, Sarah, can you hear the music?
I cannot hear the music.
You know, it's a universal truth. It's a universal truth that on Monday, when things will go wrong, everything will go wrong. But that's fine. I can hear you, and that makes me happy. I can hear you, and we can talk about it. Anyway, I just thought it was funny that it was we come to the Alaska policy form confirmation, or for Bethany Markham from APF coming in for the Regents thing, and they immediately bring up, some of the educational analysts disagree with them, kind of thing. And it's like, man, I've seen studies disagree all the time. This is nothing new. It all depends on what data you're looking at and how you extrapolate the data. And by the way, it was ICER who was talking about funding for UAA. It's a
Mm.
university organization. I mean, no bias here, no confirmation bias here, right?
Exactly. The phrase conflict of interest comes to mind.
Yeah, that's what we call outcome based stuff. ICER has done some good stuff in the past. There's no doubt about it.
Definitely.
But
Oh,
but
yeah.
I look at
I
it and go,
respect their work.
yeah, I don't know what's going on. All right, so we're going to talk about Sarah's presentation in front of the legislature, Ways and Means Committee, right?
Yep.
And
And
what that all
education.
and education and what
Yeah.
that all entailed and what it means. And we're going to do that here right now. Again, it's weird for you guys because you can't hear anything, but I can hear it, so that's all that matters. It's all fine. We're going to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and share, like and follow. Here we go. We're going to do this right now. Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska, this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It is the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting each and every morning right here, Monday through Friday, trying to bring you the best in Alaskan stories and news and politics and discussion and so much more. It is hour two. We just finished up our own personal discussion on education and problems in the state of Alaska. Now let's bring on the expert analyst for the Alaska Policy Forum. She is their educational analyst and specialist. It is Sarah Montalbano. We bring her on board this morning to discuss all this and more, including her recent presentation in front of both House Ways and Means and Education on what's happening in the state of Alaskan schools, and we welcome her to the program this morning. Hello, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
No complaints. It's Monday, but I mean, no complaints. It's all good. So Sarah, I know that I got some rave reviews. I know that I got some slides that you use and everything else, so you can share your screen today if you need to or want to in any of the talks or discussions or what's going on. But you sat down in front of House Ways and Means and House Education, and you laid some things out today. So can you first give us some background and tell us what you were tasked with bringing as a topic, and then can you give us a recap of what happened in light of what's going on in Alaska education? And again, I saw I don't know if you want to bring in. I saw the report that Must Read reported about yesterday about the teachers outnumbering the staff. You and I have talked about that a couple times. I don't know if that's some old news or new news or what, but give us some background here on what you brought before the legislature and, kind of give us our own little private recap here on this.
Yeah, this is a huge topic, and we were tasked with a large topic. We were asked to talk about outcomes, what those have looked like historically for Alaska. We were asked to discuss the funding formula in particular, as well as the general state of spending, because we all know that the state's allocation for funding is not the end of the story, far from it. And we were also asked to talk about school choice and both its academic benefits as well as the fiscal effects on states, which are generally positive.
Well, and I think that's, that is a big task. I could see this being a monumental task of trying
It
to
was
go
a
over
large
all this.
presentation.
So how did you guys break this down? Give us kind of the rundown of how you went through it, and again, give us our own private show here.
Yeah, we began with discussing Alaska's outcomes, and the good thing is that we've seen some ranking improvements on the 2022 National Assessment of Educational Progress. We haven't changed scores. We haven't improved our actual scores on most of these subjects, but we have increased our state rankings slightly. Um, we looked a lot in this presentation at the examples of Florida and Mississippi because they did particularly well promoting early literacy, as well as, these states are pretty big on school choice, especially Florida. These states have implemented some interesting incentives for other outcomes like AP classes. So we discussed that with the legislature too.
Okay, so you're teasing me with all the stuff that we're talking
A
about
lot.
here. So break it down. All right. So,
Yeah.
and this was in front of both committees. I mean, were you tasked with this? Did you give the same presentation for both committees, or were they broken out into two different topics or presentations?
It was a joint committee hearing, so this was in front of the whole group, both of them, at the
At
same time.
once. At
Yeah,
once. Okay.
at
All right.
once. Um,
Well, walk us through it. I mean, we got,
Absolutely.
we
We've
got
got time.
48 minutes. Let's break it down. Start off with, let's start at the beginning and go from there.
Absolutely. So as I said, we have these better trends, especially for, uh, children who are in the free and reduced lunch program. There's a lot of, issues with this metric, but it's generally a good sense of, students that are facing some sort of economic disadvantage. And so, on the 2022 NAEP, free and reduced lunch fourth grade math scores increased from 50th nationwide to 48th. Those are good things. These are, ranking improvements. It could be just that other states declined a lot over the pandemic. But the fact that we were able to stay pretty steady is a good thing. And then we discussed, these states that have made early literacy improvements, but also long-term improvements in their eighth grade math and, you know, reading scores, as well as AP courses. So one of the interesting things about Florida is that they offer an incentive for teachers and students to score a 3 or higher on the AP exam. So that's a passing score. And, the fact is, in 2020, Florida had 34% of their high school graduates passed with one AP test with a 3 or higher, at least. And that metric is only 14% in Anchorage. So we can look, the overarching message of the presentation is that we can look at these incentives and figure out better ways to do things. And we have the examples of other states to look at.
And as we look at this, I mean, the problem is that we seem to continue to have this attitude of, well, we're Alaska, we don't do it like anybody else. We need to do our own thing. The problem is other people have already broken the trail and they've made the path easier. We just need to be able to look at it and follow those steps, right? And we have been up until this point just not interested in doing that, not interested in making some of those changes. And that's why we've remained 48th, 49th in all these educational scores.
Absolutely. We're unique, but we are not so unique that we cannot learn and take the best pieces from states that have done these things well. Florida is a leader for so many states nationwide. I mean, they're doing some really incredible things to ensure that their kids are getting the education they need. So that was a large part of the presentation, is saying, look, Florida has done it. I don't see why Alaska can't.
And of course, the reaction was probably a lot of eye rolling and everything else. What specifically should we be modeling, Florida, Mississippi? What are some of the things, in your opinion, that we should be taking up with that? I mean, what are some of the things that you think right off the top of the pile we could adopt easily and see a change?
One of the interesting things Florida does is this incentive program for AP classes and things like that. Their early literacy reforms, the Alaska Reads Act passed last year, is actually a pretty good mimic of these programs, and we'll see some improvements in fourth grade reading proficiency from that. Another state that does their school funding formula pretty well, and I can give a recap of the formula if we'd like. I don't
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, we could do that.
Absolutely. So the way our funding formula works right now, I'm going to toggle to the slide because this is a particularly complicated subject. So the base student allocation is this $5,960 that every student is supposed to get. And then we have average daily membership. That's our enrollment average. That's counted through 20 days in October of each year. And then average daily membership is adjusted for all sorts of things like school size and district cost, special needs multipliers, career and technical education, intensive needs, and then correspondence students are multiplied by 90% and then added in back at the end. And so the basic formula is that you multiply the BSA by this adjusted average daily membership and you get basic need. And basic need is paid first in part by local contributions for those districts that are in an organized borough or municipality, and federal impact aid. And then the rest is paid by the state. So that's the general scope of the funding formula. One thing that a state does that I find very interesting is Tennessee. And what Tennessee has done, they just revamped their school funding formula. And their districts are actually receiving an outcomes-based component. And so they get their BSA, they get their weights, they get some very interesting things. But then they will get per student bonuses based on things like third grade English language arts scores, fourth grade growth in ELA scores, eighth grade math scores. For high school students, they're looking at ACT scores and improvements from those tests. And high schoolers that are graduating with industry credentials that matter to employers. And so that's one of the things I think we could do better is incentivizing the outcomes we want to see in the formula, because we need to reward the schools that are getting results and incentivize the behaviors we want to see.
Well, and I agree with that. I mean, I think that is, performance metrics are important, right? I mean, we have to look at these things and understand, if we're producing a product, we need to have a good product at the end. Any company or factory that creates something, if they create a substandard product, they can't come back and go, well, we need more money. We're doing the best we can do, and that's what we do. But we need to be paid more. We need more for this or more for that, without some kind of metrics. And there was a whole discussion on the BSA that went through. There are some crazy things that have changed in or that are, I guess, misunderstood in the BSA. One of the talking points, and I was just looking for the story real quick because I can't find it, but they talk about one of the things in the BSA is they count, they count some schools, like, for example, the Anchorage School District. They count the school district, even though it only has 40,000 students, it counts the school district like there's 77,000 students in there.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wait a second, we're still not performing at, we're well below the national average. We're still super low on all these things. And yet there's no metric to hold them accountable for the product that they're delivering. And at the same time, they're getting almost twice the money that you would logically think. I mean, the formula is very complex, right? I mean, talk about that for just a second. How the fact that some of these places get, they get almost double the amount of money for the number of students that they actually have.
Yeah, this is a huge part of the funding formula, because if you assume that the space student allocation of 5,960, that's what a student's getting, you are missing out on all of these adjustment factors that are adjust the average daily membership. So you've got your enrollment count, and then you apply a school size multiplier. The school size multiplier, I think, is too complicated for what it needs to be. There's a whole tier system, and I've written it down on my slides because this is so hard to just hold in your head. But schools under 20 students get a multiplier of 39.6 per student. So multiply that BSA by 39.6. And then, schools with 750 students or more are being actually penalized. So once you surpass about 250 students, you start receiving less as a district for the actual number of students that are enrolled. So that's one component of this that I think incentivizes keeping schools under that 250 student mark, because you want to maximize the funding you get for these students. And the median school size in Alaska is actually 177 students, which is well below that, and you get 8% more for your BSA. So that's complicated, and I think that definitely has some incentives there. And then, the next thing is the district cost factor. That's normalized to Anchorage's cost of living. And then all these districts have different cost multipliers for their cost of living. And then one of the big ones is the special education multiplier. That is applied at a flat 0.2, so you get 20% more than your average daily membership for this general special needs. And then there are intensive special needs students. So if a particular student is identified with intensive special needs, they get a multiplier of 13 to their BSA. And that doesn't necessarily have to go directly to that student. Pardon me. It's fungible. It goes into the district's pot, and the district decides how they're going to spend it. It's a funding formula. It's not a spending formula.
Right.
But that is certainly a contributor. And then there is there's a very small multiplier for career and technical education. That's, 1.5%, I think, upward. And then correspondence students are actually given kind of the short end of the stick in this formula, because their membership, their enrollment, is subtracted out at the front of the formula and then multiplied by 0.9. and then they are just added in at the end. So, the funding for correspondence students is 90% of what traditional public school students get.
Right. Well, this is again, this. I mean, we could have a full hour simply on the intricacies
Yeah.
and the ins and outs of the BSA alone.
Pretty
Just the
good summary. Yeah,
yeah,
right here. But
exactly of what goes on there. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. We're up against the break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. We'll return with more here in just a moment. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. Back with more right after this.
I am so sorry. I think I'm coming down with something in the coffee.
Listen to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be best. You're a bad, bad man. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, now we're in the break. Sarah's coming down with something.
Sorry
Honey
about
and
that.
honey and lemon. That's all I could say. Honey and lemon.
Yes.
It works. It works wonders. It works wonders. Sarah, this is a lot to choke down. I mean,
It is.
it really is.
I
And
learned so much putting this together. I really did.
I really wish that I could find I wish maybe I saved it. I don't have it right here in front of me. But the story that did take a little bit of a crack at breaking that down and taking a look at it. The number of students, the amount of funding. Rob Myers in the chat room says the school size multiplier gives districts more money for smaller, less efficient schools and penalizes districts for closing buildings they don't need. And that may be the case, but then again, when I look at Anchorage and they've got 43 or 44,000 students and they're getting 77,000 students worth of money, I mean, that doesn't necessarily look like they're penalizing them too much at that point, and especially analyzing when homeschooling, gets only 90% of the pot as far as that goes as well. It's really frustrating to watch this whole thing because the average person, I mean, up until 18 months ago, I didn't understand to me, the base student allocation was you give this much per student at the attendance rate, right? That's what I thought. I
Mhm.
didn't realize that it had all these different multipliers and factors and levers and everything else. And all of a sudden you realize, my God, it is so complex. And when the average person reads the newspaper and says, well, yes, we should help our kids. It's only $1,000 more per kid. But you realize that districts are getting 2, 3, 4, 5 times the number of students they actually have in the classroom. That's when it really turns into some real money, right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think it's important to remember too that the funding formula isn't all the funding we get. I have a slide in this presentation where I list off so many of the other things that contribute to the form on top of the formula. You've got your one-time grants, you've got federal grants, and one of the biggest ones in history was this COVID relief money that districts are still working their way through. And just we can talk more about that, but it's just these adjustment factors and all of this stuff on top of the formula means this is not a simple problem.
No, it's not. It's not a simple problem at all. It's a very complex problem. And in some ways, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be cynical, but in some ways I believe that's by design. It kind of obfuscates everything and so you can't really tell how much has been spent where, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes a real it becomes a real problem in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so important to keep the focus on this once the furor dies down, because I think so many people are coming into this the first time saying, "Yeah, increase this. This is, this is money that's directly helping the kids. It's only $1,000, and that $1,000 follows the student." That's not how it's working, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. They think, "Oh, it's only $1,000."
Yeah.
per student. But again, it's not. I mean, if it's $1,000 per student for 44,000 students, or it's $1,000 for students for 77,000 students,
Mhm.
that becomes the big sticking point in the long run. And where do we go from here? How do we fix that? That's the thing. I mean, do we simplify the formula? Do we open it up and start talking about it? Because I guarantee you, at this rate, nobody on the other side who is pro increase the funding wants to open that formula up at all, because they're kind of happy with just the way it is right now.
There are definitely opportunities to simplify the formula that I can get into because our presentation discussed just some recommendations regardless of, feasibility, political, viability,
Right.
things like that. Just like looking at this and saying, hey, here are the technical issues that other states have worked to simplify from formulas that looked a lot more like Alaska's that they've changed up.
All right. Um, we are up to the return here. We're returning here in just a second. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. Like it, share, like it, share, like it, follow. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy.
Yep. The Michael Duke Show continues. Our guest is Sarah Montalbano from the Alaska Policy Forum. We're going to jump in with her and continue our conversations. I was just saying during the break, that I don't think that the funding formula, the way it is right now, being uber complex and over complicated, I don't think that that's a bug. I think that's a feature, right? I think in some ways it's working as intended, because it makes it so complicated that people don't really understand what is happening inside that BSA. So when they read the newspaper and it says it's only $1,000 increase per student, they go, well, that's, cost of living and things in 10 years and yada, yada. Okay, I can see that. Not realizing, again, I don't mean to beat up on Anchorage, but that's the one number that I couldn't find the article here during the break, that where they said there was 44,000 students, but they were being paid as if there were 77,000 students. I mean, $1,000 a student. Now you're talking real money when you're talking about going over and above that. It's millions of dollars. And so my question was to Sarah, do we simplify the BSA? Do we make it a simple one-to-one? Do we make it simpler and better instead of having all these different carve outs and everything else? What do you say to that? Do you have, are there some solutions to what we can do for the BSA to try and simplify this and make it easier for people to understand and for it to fund the state's educational system?
Absolutely. First and foremost, the school funding formula should be transparent enough that families and the general public can easily understand it. We came up with some recommendations for the legislature, and I will hit some of the highlights here. Um, one of them is that bond debt reimbursement tends to incentivize, having excess facilities space compared with deed standards, things like that. And so, if you're able to restrict bond debt reimbursement or allow it for rapidly growing districts that need this extra space, that's a great idea. But we want right sized facilities and to reduce some of this bureaucratic influence, because I can talk about that as well. Um, the hold harmless provision is an interesting thing, and I had to do some digging back into the history of Alaska's school funding formula. And the hold harmless provision is basically that um, districts won't be penalized for a drop over a certain percentage in their average daily membership after the adjustment for school size. And so in 2001 or so, the hold harmless provision had 10%. So schools that dropped 10% or more, their funding was staggered over a couple of years
Right.
in that decline.
To deal
Um,
with it, right.
exactly. And the hold harmless was reinstated in 2008, and that has a more generous enrollment threshold now. It's 5%. So, schools and districts should be incentivized to keep their students through good or improving outcomes. I think it's definitely important to have that incentive there. And then, as I mentioned, I think one of the biggest things that would make a difference is incentivizing outcomes in the formula. And I talked about Tennessee in our previous segment. They talk about scores and growth with per student bonuses for schools on these things. One of the things Florida does is their AP class bonuses. So they've got
Right.
a direct to teacher bonus, but the districts also get, an increase to their average daily membership base funding as well. And that seems to be helping them. They, had the second highest rate of AP exam passing, and they're still among the lowest per student. All right, I think that's, the first bracket of
Right.
things. We can talk more in depth about correspondence students and some of the other weights, the intensive needs weighting, school size multiplier, average daily membership, things like that.
Well, and I think, again, that's where we need to move on here to now. So the second part of your presentation, after going through the BSA and everything else, taking a look at all these different factors, what was your analysis of the outcomes of, because this was about outcomes, right, in the long run. So what was your analysis of the outcomes based on what we have done thus far? And then we'll save the last segment for changes that should be made overall to fix the overall outcomes in the long run. So give me the current outcomes and what it looks like here in the state.
Yeah, so Alaska is spending $18,313 per student as of 2020. That includes all sources of funding. That average varies wildly between districts. I think the Aleutian Region School District is the highest of the 2018-2019 school year, and they're spending $104,000 per student. And then there's districts like Galena City that their enrollment is mostly correspondence students, and so they're spending about $7,000 per student. And Anchorage is about $16,500 for all sources of funding. So that's the basic scope of things. And then when we look at our outcomes, we have not improved our outcomes. And one of the graphs I showed, and your radio listeners will probably miss out on this, but I would like to show it here if I'm able to.
While Sarah's bringing that up, I remembered now where the story was, and I'll bring it up. It was from the Alaska landmine. He actually did, credit where credit's due. He actually did a fantastic article on discussion of the BSA to begin with. So we'll get back to that. Go ahead, Sarah.
All right. Let's see if this will go. I've got my chart pulled up here.
Okay.
Yeah, here we go.
There you go.
And so a lot of the discussion seems to be centering around this increase for inflation. And I thought it would be important to look at this baseline from 2002 instead of looking once these school funding formula changes were made. And so, looking at that 2002 baseline, we've got about $12,000-ish in funding per student in average daily attendance. So this is actually data from the National Education Association. The research division does a really good job of tracking these things. And I just adjusted upward each year for the Urban Alaska CPI. And so what I want to call attention to is that these formula changes in the 2008-2009 area led to a huge jump in per student funding, almost $5,000. And that was, stuff like increasing the intensive needs weighting, hold harmless, things like that jumped up this per pupil spending. And then, in 2021, we're still 22% higher than what we would have been for inflation, adjusted upward from 2002. The most interesting part is this line that's moving across the chart, and that's fourth grade NAEP scores in reading. And that's declined 8 points. That's almost a full year of attainment since 2003 when we started working into the NAEP assessment. So our outcomes have declined over this time. We have infused schools and districts with large amounts of money before, and that has not improved outcomes. And so that's one of the basic messages of the presentation is, look, we've done this before.
Right. We've been there, done that. We've thrown more money at it. And we've seen it go down as we go through. So the outcomes are not necessarily what, what we want them to be, obviously. And this is, you also had another chart I know that was kind of like a shotgun chart that showed that it wasn't necessarily listed to a certain socioeconomic background or region or anything
Mhm.
else. It was kind of a little bit of everywhere. Some places were doing better than others, but it didn't necessarily have to do with the amount of money that was being poured into those districts.
Absolutely. There are some districts that have, the characteristics that are making them do well. And one of the slides that legislators really wanted to ask me a lot of questions about um, shows this plot of schools and their per student funding, and then their scores on the AK star are on the left, the vertical axis. And all of the schools that are clustered in this low cost, above average outcomes are correspondence schools or charter schools. And so that was definitely one of the takeaways I wanted to see is like, look, this school choice that we do have, these charter schools and correspondence schools, really seem to be improving students' outcomes, and they're managing to do it in a very fiscally responsible way.
Which is what we, of course, as homeschoolers have argued for many years that we basically that the most efficient use of the school dollars was in the homeschooling correspondence type environment because again we didn't have the brick and mortar overhead. You had one teacher that dealt with a lot more students but on a one-to-one basis versus in a classroom and everything else, and it was overall it is a it is a great it is a great example of what can be done with less, how less can actually be more in the long run. Unfortunately, they don't want to hear that. This is why there's the argument that we've seen, and you've talked about again, Florida and Mississippi. I know that Arizona's now got their education fund and things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, this is why something like backpack funding could be so important for this kind of situation, right?
Absolutely. Florida, I don't know if you've heard, we're very excited. They've passed their universal school choice, this education savings accounts kind of idea where the funding can follow the student. And a lot of these funding, I think Arizona awards for their ESAs range between about $4,000 and $9,000, depending on the characteristics, the grade of the child. Do they have special needs? Those can go higher for that, and they're reaping, fiscal benefits too, just on a per student basis. Like we're looking at, I had a slide here, and that's 90% of their base funding for students. And so, the state's getting to keep 10%. And just from letting the parents make these choices about what works best for their child and how to customize the education. And one study I pulled up for this is that done by EdChoice, and they estimate there's per student savings between $3,300 and $7,500 generated through fiscal year 2018 for state and local taxpayers, and that equates to up to $28 billion. So this is not something to sneeze at. This is good, obviously academically for a lot of students, but it's also very good for state budgets as well.
Sarah Montalbano is our guest. We're coming up on the break. We got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We will continue in just a moment. We will come back and maybe she can offer us some of the solutions that she sees. And we will have that discussion in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. Back with more after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee. Ah, nice beard. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, in the break with Sarah Montalbano. Give her a chance to drink some tea, honey, water, whatever it is.
Yeah.
A vodka. We
Coffee.
recommend vodka on Mondays. It's
Yeah, Monday morning might be a little too
oh, come
soon for
on.
me.
It's 5 p.m. somewhere. Little bit of brandy. Little bit of brandy will get you going on through there. Yeah, that shotgun chart, which I have a copy of, and I don't know what I should have brought it up, but the shotgun chart really, I think, shows in a snapshot, it really shows everything at once, that you could see that it doesn't have to be a high dollar, high budget, the best school out there. It is, it is more along the lines of focusing on the student rather than on the building, the infrastructure, the administration, and everything else. That's, I think, really been part of the problem here in the growth of this.
Yeah, one of the data points I brought up because I think it is important, even though it is not an Alaska specific problem, is this administration growth that we've discussed before. And I looked at district administrator growth, and they grew almost 18% since 2008 to 2019. And the number of teachers declined almost 6% over that period. And so I think it's just, this growing compliance cost is not helpful for schools and districts actually achieving their mission of having kids to give them the basic skills they need.
Well, I guess you got to ask, is that really the mission?
Yeah, exactly. If that is the
really?
mission.
I mean,
Hopefully it is.
you would hope that would be the mission, but it seems like more and more, the more we look at it, the more things, it would seem that the mission is more justification and expansion. That seems to
Mhm,
be the mission in a lot of ways. That's the very nature of government. Doesn't make it evil or anything else. It's just the nature of government that seems to be the expansion, justification, and expansion seems to be the overall factor in government, and schools are no different in that case.
mhm. It's the curse of bureaucracy that we see. Well, if I don't spend my budget, then I'm going to have a cut next year, so I've gotta spend it all.
Got to justify what I'm
Yeah.
doing, so I need to
Yeah, that
spend the
is
money.
not a school-specific
Yeah,
conclusion. That is
no,
every agency.
yeah. I got my first education in that when I was about 22 years old, 21, 22 years old. Went to the DOT, and I was running a parts warehouse at the time for automotive and truck parts. And I remember the guy brought me into the back room and he said, "Get out your pad. I need 3 of these and 10 of these and 5 of these." And I got some orders from him every week, but this is the first time it was like a $20,000 order. And I realized it was because it was the end of the fiscal. It was June,
Mhm.
early June, and he wants to fill the shelf with stuff. And so he had to spend it to put it up there. And it was just like, wow, it was just so
Yeah.
shocking to see. Anyway, we're going to come back here in a second. One of the things that I want to talk about
Mhm.
is the revocation of the requirement in the BSA that used to be a requirement, a statutory requirement, that 70% of the BSA had to go to the classroom,
Mhm.
and that's changed, and that has led to, I think, what we're talking about here again, the bloat on overhead and in administrators versus teachers. You've been talking about that a lot, where you've got 3 teachers or 3 administrators in some school districts for every teacher. It's led to that. It really has, and that administrative bloat is sucking up a lot of the dollars that we're talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, I can't speak to the exact calculation, but I know there's been discussion where it's, less than 50%, and that's kind of atrocious. Um, yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that.
Right. Anything else that we're about 90 seconds away here. Anything else that was a big surprise to you as you dug through this and came out and put all these things together? Anything else that was a big surprise to you before we go back?
Just just looking at the way these multipliers blow up, the average daily membership, honestly, just walking through those calculations myself, was a pretty, informative exercise. And then, the difficulty of finding information prior to, this 2008, school funding formula changes, I was like, what did our school funding formula look like before? And that's
Yeah.
kind of hard information to find. So yeah, I just pulled so many numbers for this that my brain is just scrambled.
It's interesting stuff. At the end of these adjustment factors, the number of students used for the BSA formula can vary greatly from actual numbers of students being educated. For instance, in Anchorage, the 40,944 average daily student counts as if there are 73,372 students after the adjustments. The
Mhm.
Alaska Gateway School District, meanwhile, has a post-adjustment ADM of more than 4 times the 325 average students that it recorded last year. That's insane. All right. Hold the line. Sarah Montalbano. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go. Sarah Montalbano is our guest from the Alaska Policy Forum. She's the education policy analyst for the APF. And we're talking about her presentation in front of the Joint Committee of Ways and Means in Education on the BSA and everything else. One of the problems that we were just talking about is that the BSA, there used to be a regulation in that 70% of the BSA needed to end up in the classroom. And that was gone away here in the last 10 years or so. And that has led directly, I think, to an overhead and bloat in the administrative side. You have put out some columns and analyze some reports that talk about, we've got some places where there are almost three administrators for every teacher. It's usually it's 1-to-1 or 1.2 to 1. A lot of places there are more administrators than there are teachers, and that's problematic in the long run. And I think is led to this bloat that we've talked about in education. But let's get down to it, Sarah. What is the solutions? What does your analysis lead you to, and what did you recommend for solutions for the legislature to try and address these problems we have in our education system? I actually have to unmute Sarah. First of all, let me do that. There you go, Sarah. Sorry about that.
There
Go
we
ahead.
go. My apologies. I should have looked. This gets a little complicated in these next recommendations, but some of them I think are useful to look at. As I was mentioning, the school size multiplier I think is too complicated, and it is not exactly obvious to me why there needs to be all of these different adjustments for these different factors. And we've discussed this with some experts from other states, and they're going, okay, this is kind of weird. So, we could look at, creating a simple whole number weight for schools below a certain size and eliminating it for higher tiers. And solutions like that would help to correct this incentive that we have to have smaller schools that are less efficient when they don't need to be. And then average daily membership, I think we could be really leveraging as an incentive here. Alaska has the highest rate of chronic absenteeism in the United States. That's 29% of students are chronically absent, which I think is, gone for 3 weeks or more. I would have to look at Deed's definition. And the fact of the matter is that it is hard to improve outcomes when students aren't in the seats, that they're not
Yeah,
there learning the material.
they don't
Um,
show up, right?
yeah, and that's one of the things that our average daily membership calculation right now, we use an enrollment count period, which is actually pretty unique. We count over that 20 days in October. Most states are using average daily enrollment through the all or most of the school year. And so that gives them a better sense, a better representation of what they expect to spend. And then 7 states actually use a variant of average daily attendance. So they're counting the students present in the school over most or all of the school year.
Right.
And I'm loath to say it, but California does this very well. And they have a 12% chronic absenteeism rate. And so, like, that's something we should be thinking about as well in these discussions of the formulas. How do we get students in school to learn this material? Yeah, and then finally, discussing correspondence students, this will segue us into our school choice discussion.
Right,
But
right.
correspondence students are 16.5% of K-12 students in Alaska, but they are only 5% of K-12 expenditures. And so one of the ways we should be looking at this how can we make this fairer for correspondence students? There's hundreds of correspondence students with special needs or participating in career and technical education, and so why shouldn't they be eligible for these multipliers, that 20% up and that 1.5% up, um, to fund them at a more equal level? And then there's students with intensive special needs that aren't getting anything different in their correspondence school funding or their allotment that actually makes it to the families. Um, Parents could do a lot if they got a 10 times multiplier or a 13 times multiplier, like students in public schools too. So that's just one thing to consider: is how do we make this fairer? How do we also serve our correspondence students as well as we are funding the uh, students with these characteristics in traditional public schools? The only difference is where their education is taking place.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna, setting aside the special needs and special education component of it, but what you're saying, that this public or the correspondence schools should get, more of the take, yada yada. See, I would disagree with that. I think we need to go backwards from the other side and say, you need to look at what the correspondence schools are doing with this 90%.
Yeah,
And if we could take
they're
all of
doing
the schools,
remarkable stuff.
yeah, if they could take all of the schools and do it with a 90%, well, we've just shaved 10, you just shaved 10% right off the top, let alone all the multipliers and everything else that are on top of it. That is,
Absolutely.
that's part of the problem here. And that's why educational choice is so important. And quite honestly, I think that's why it's cropping up all over the US. You're seeing this become a rallying cry. I talked about it earlier with Virginia, when Terry McAuliffe got up and basically told people, you don't get to have a say in what we're teaching your children. And I think that was a red flag for many parents across the country when they realized maybe they need to be taking a little bit of a closer hand. And of course, the pandemic, showed that brick and mortars are not the only answer, whether it's correspondence, homeschooling, whether it's distance learning, whether it's teacher pools or learning pods, or all these different kinds of things. They are all viable options. At the time, they were the only option because brick and mortar schools weren't there. But now people are saying, let me take that money, let me do with it what I think is best, and I'll, and as you showed in a lot of your presentation, we will deliver a better product in the long run.
Mhm. Absolutely. I really want to bring attention back because I'm being accused in the comments of bogging down in the formula. You are right. The goal of all of this discussion is getting each individual child the skills that they need and the education that works best for them. And I really firmly believe that school choice does this very, very well. It's funny you mentioned the pandemic because correspondence school enrollment almost doubled from, I think, 2020 to 2021, 92% growth there. And our level of correspondence students are still 42% over the level they were pre-pandemic. So, a lot of families tried it, some went back, but a lot of them are sticking to it because they like the way that this works for them. And so I understand the cost savings, and it's a very important part of the program. But there is also, the fact that some parents would want to do this more if there was slightly more that reaches them through their allotment. And part of the presentation was actually delivered by my partner, but he mentioned that he went through a couple scenarios. Okay, what if we restricted correspondence schools? If all of the correspondence school allotment program children went back to public school, brick and mortar school, excuse me, that would result in an additional $162 million in funding formula costs. If we were back to pandemic levels of correspondence enrollment, we would have funding formula savings of 87 million. So, looking at this, school choice is a good bet fiscally for states on a per student basis. And I have no doubt that it helps academically, socially, economically, all of these benefits that students accrue through having an education customized for them.
Right, exactly. What's the choice? We got less than about a minute here. What's the choice? I mean, is it a savings account like it is in Arizona? Is it a backpack funding situation where the money follows the student? Did you guys offer any of that quickly here?
We didn't offer ideas for new programs. We said, look, here's the states that are doing ESAs. They're benefiting from this so much. But yeah, the correspondence school program, any way that allows the money to follow the student, I think is a good thing for reaping academic and fiscal benefits.
Sarah Montalbano has been our guest today. Sarah, what else are you working on quickly here before we let you go? What else are you working on next that we need to know about?
Oh gosh, I mean, we've got so many projects in the pipeline, and you should go to alaskapolicyforum.org and just click subscribe to our newsletter, and you will see our posts as I get them out there.
Yeah, and Sarah's got some great stuff. It's a good education on education if you go to the Alaska Policy Forum and click on the education links and just work your way back through the articles that Sarah's been working on, a lot of the analysis. Some of that stuff is super eye-opening, and it'll give you a whole new perspective on things. Sarah Montalbano, thank you for joining us on this Montalbano Monday. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, we're out of time. We got more coming up tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story will be joining us. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be kind, love one another, live well. All right. Final bite at the apple for Miseducation, Sarah Montalbano. Sarah, final thoughts here as we let you go. I mean, you've great presentation in front of the legislature. You gave
Thank
us,
you.
I thought, a pretty good recap here. It's hard when we're breaking it up like this, but it's
scattered.
yeah, it's a little, and you're not feeling good and everything. But I'll give you final thoughts here. Maybe just summate and what's your suggestion here? Give me your final thoughts.
The broad strokes of this presentation are that we have very high per pupil spending, accounting for everything. The school funding formula isn't the end all be all of education funding. Our outcomes have declined even as we've increased our spending. And we have so many examples from other states that are doing this well and that we can learn from. And incentives matter. I cannot overstate that. That is the basic premise of economics, is that we have these incentives baked into the system, and we are going to see more of what we incentivize. I don't think that's a controversial statement at all. So those are my basic thoughts, summary-wise, for this presentation.
Well, we appreciate all you do. We appreciate your hard work, and we look
Thank
forward
you.
to talking to you again soon. I'll be keeping my mouse button over the APF website so we can follow it and see what you got going on. Thank you for keeping us
Thank
in the
you.
loop. We
Yeah.
appreciate all you do.
Yeah.
Feel better, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just
Lots of
gone
fluid.
hoarse over the hour here, so
Yeah.
I apologize.
Go take a nap. Feel better. We will see you. We'll see you later. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Good to talk with you. All right, folks, that brings us over to the end of the show. The end of the show. That's how it works. We appreciate you guys coming in and joining us. Don't forget to check us out at the Common Sense Corps over there. If you want to help support the show, we'd love you to be part of it. Other than that, we are out of time. We will see you tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.